Having the number one pick is going to give any fan base a sense of joy and renewed enthusiasm for the offseason and beyond. So what if we went through every draft of the 21st century and redraft the first pick? Well, that is what I'm going to be doing today. Now, there's going to be a few rules here. The first one being that father-sons are not going to be considered at all because we're going to keep the draft rules pretty much the same throughout this entire video. Academy kids are also not going to be put forth here in the discussion either because that is a different hypothetical in a video I actually want to do in the future, so we'll do that then. List builds are going to be a little bit of a factor here, but overall, the better player and better fit is going to get the run in a lot of these drafts. The player that got drafted to the team can still be redrafted to that same team as well, so not every pick needs to be fixed, and we'll go over that as well. And future drafts are not going to be impacted either, so don't turn around and go, Daz, in 3 years' time, they're going to draft this player, so they didn't need to draft that player, 3 years, 4 years beforehand. That's not going to be a thing here. Future drafts are going to be impacted. The hypotheticals are going to be insane, but this is just a fun little exercise, guys. All right, cool, let's go. We go to 2000, St Kilda, who originally drafted Nick Riewoldt and redraft Nick Riewoldt. There is no argument on the face of the planet that anyone can make that Nick is not the right choice here. Yes, they still had Stewie Lowe, Barry Hall, they drafted Justin Kazitsky, and they got Aaron Hamill from Carlton in the 2000 offseason leading into the 2001 season under new coach Malcolm Blight. But there is no argument that Nick is not the right choice here for what he was able to do for the Saints, one of the better centre-half forwards and one of the best aerobic athletes at that position that I have ever seen. This is a simple one. You take Nick again 9 out of 9 times. In 2001, Hawthorn drafted Luke Hodge and redraft Luke Hodge. Now, Gary Ablett Jr. not available for this redraft. As I said, father-sons, not a thing, no matter what the draft rules were back then. Not that that's a factor for Gary Ablett Jr., but I just want to bring that across again. However, whilst the footy consensus is probably going to put Chris Judd over Luke Hodge, and probably for good reason, I don't see any argument that what Hodge did for Hawthorn is going to be worth risking bringing Judd in. The 4 flags, what he was able to do as a midfielder, as a halfback, what he was able to do for a young group coming through. Yes, he didn't captain the 2008 flag, but he did for the entire three-peat and won the Norm Smith medal in 08 and, of course, 14. Again, the same thing as St Kilda with Nick. There is no Hawthorn fan on the planet, I don't believe, that would rather the Hawks go back in time and take Judd over Hodge, knowing what we know now. None at all. In 2002, St Kilda, again, go with Brendan Goddard and redraft Brendan Goddard. I don't think, again, there's going to be a whole lot of argument for anyone else in the draft to try and do what Goddard did in his prime, that kind of 07 to 2012-ish era. He was a consensus top 12, top 15 player in the competition. He was a utility, his size, his long kicking, all of those fantastic things. Of course, that immortal mark in the 2010 drawn grand final and put the Saints in front with that kick. I just don't see another option here that the Saints would have rather gone with. Did get stiffed when he went to the Bombers. Of course, we know the reasons why there, but another good pick by the Saints. 2 for 2 so far, and 3 for 3. It's about to end, though. It is the first time we saw a decent argument, though. Jared McVeigh was available in this draft and was one of the most underrated players, I think, since I've been watching footy. I still think the Saints go with Goddard here. 2003, we go to the Western Bulldogs, who drafted Adam Cooney and redraft David Mundy. Now, this is a genuine conversation here because you've gone longevity versus prime. The fact that Cooney is the only number 1 draft pick to win a Brownlow means this has the means of being an absolutely crazy pick. However, outside of that 2008 season, Cooney didn't really live up to that kind of performance from a consistent standpoint. The Bulldogs may have been able to build a better midfield around someone as consistent as David Mundy was and a star that he was for a long period of time. And given that the Cooney selection didn't end up in a grand final appearance or a premiership, obviously, is why I've gone down this path. If you're the kind of person that's thinking, I would rather take the Brownlow medalist at 1 and the Bulldogs should have done a few things differently, I've got nothing against that decision at all, and I don't mind it. Tough decision. I've gone with Mundy here. In 2004, the Tigers took Brett Deledio and redraft Lance Franklin. I feel for Lids here in a massive way. Now, some of the criticism around Richmond's 04 draft is that the Richard Tambling pick that came just before the Lance Franklin one, but Deledio was by no means a bad number 1 selection at all. Unfortunately, he just had a lot of superstars in this draft that was there with him. But what Deledio did in a bad Richmond side for the majority of his career is he helped bring Richmond fans to the footy. He had the blonde tips, he had the pace, the skill, the goal-kicking ability as a midfielder. He is definitely not a scrub as a number one pick in the slightest. And of course, missed out on success when he went to GWS as Richmond got good. But I don't think this was a bad call. But when you've got a bloke who kicked 1,000 goals, 4 picks down, you've just got to go with him. Buddy, what a star. What Bud would have looked like with Jack Riewoldt, though. Whew. In 2005, we go to Carlton, who drafted Mark Murphy and redraft Scott Pendlebury. He's had more disposals than anyone else as an AFL player, and again, this is the right choice. I'm really curious to see what we think of Mark Murphy as a number one draft pick, like his legacy as a number one pick. Now, recently, of course, the number one picks have been pretty good. You think of Walsh, Rao, these guys who have had this kind of impact. Are they going to have the longevity of a Mark Murphy kind of career? Who knows? But Murphy was never really a Brownlow contender. He was never really in a Carlton side that was going to get to, you know, a grand final or anything like that. So what do we think of it? Was he just a really good player that was thrust into a bad situation? Probably. Does that make him a bad number one pick? Absolutely not. And Pendlebury, we know what kind of superstar he is. He just finishes in the top 3 in Collingwood's best and fairest for fun at this point. 2 flags, Norm Smith medal. Can't ask for much better than that. 2006, we go to Carlton again, who drafted Bryce Gibbs and redraft Joel Selwood. Now, this was really important in my rules from earlier because the argument is not going to be, can you imagine Selwood and Pendlebury in the same midfield? Every list refreshes at every redraft. So in this iteration, they have still taken Mark Murphy the year before and now get Selwood in this hypothetical. Now, of course, Pendlebury and Selwood together in the same midfield would have been so OP, absolutely, but it's as simple as it gets. What Selwood was able to do at Geelong was extraordinary. Gibbs, a little bit like Murphy, was fine as a number one pick. Of course, Carlton were never really, you know, the kind of side that was getting to deep September runs for the majority of his career. He had a pretty good season at Adelaide and then a season that was not so great at the Crows. Is he a mid-tier number one pick? Probably, but the hypotheticals here for Carlton must be killing you, and unfortunately, it does not end here. In 2007, Carlton took Matthew Cruiser, the infamous Cruiser Cup, and redraft Patrick Dangerfield. Now, you can go with Cyril Rioli here. The combination of him and Eddie Betts would have been bloody extraordinary, to be honest. You could also go with Trent Cotchin here with what he was able to do as a leader at Richmond. However, how Cotch was early on in his career before that kind of turnaround would have been not detrimental to Carlton, of course, with Murphy and Gibbs there, because remember, we were fresh from the previous drafts, but I just don't think that as a midfield was going to propel, you know, the Blues that much further. Koch, of course, has spoken about the fact that he just wanted cheap possessions, or that was the kind of player that he was before he had to go through the turnaround. Would that have helped a really bad team? Well, not really, because it didn't really help Richmond at that point in time. And once, of course, he became that better leader, better captain, better player, and more damaging player, Richmond took off. Now, that wasn't the only reason that Richmond got good, of course, but that was a huge underlying factor. Would that have happened at Carlton? Who knows? But Cyril v. Danger, I'm not saying Danger's a better player all time, but what I do know is that explosiveness out of the midfield would have been insane. No bad choice here. I've gone with Danger. Hawthorn fans, I'm not saying Dangerfield's better than Rioli all time. I'm not. He probably is, but that's not exclusively what I'm saying here. For the fit at Carlton, who already had the bloody good small forward in Betts, it's highly unlikely they go with another one. That's why I've gone with Danger. 2008, we go to Melbourne, who drafted Jack Watts and redraft Nick Naitanui. Now, this was so important to me in the rules because you could, at this point, turn around and go, why would they do that, Daz? They would go on and draft Gawn the next year. That's why I said that future drafts are going to become ultimate hypotheticals here, because the idea of trying to finagle a different pick and then keep every draft pick from then on exactly the same is just an impossible exercise. Nick Naitanui out of this draft, his athletic profile, what he would have brought to Melbourne at that point for that midfield would have been insane, which is why I've gone with him here. And this is the Vic bias that I'm calling out here, the love that Nick would have got and the way he would have swept up, Melbourne and the city of Melbourne and the state of Victoria at that point in time would have been genuinely crazy. Now, he's already done that in WA, a revered figure in WA, and I'm not suggesting that he in Victoria would have been better for his career or anything like that. Absolutely not. What I do know is the Eastern Seaboard footy media would have loved him more if he was here. It's something about the game that I don't particularly enjoy or like. I unfortunately know that that's a fact. In 2009, Melbourne drafted Tom Scully and redraft Dustin Martin. Yeah, it's Dusty or Fife here. And this is pretty crazy as to how I came to this decision. Again, I'm not saying that Dusty is better than Fife all time. I think that is one of the most fun discussions to have around, all-time conversations, Dusty v. Fife, because Dusty had the opportunity to win the 3 Norm Smith medals because he played in those 3 grand finals. You've also got the people that don't think he deserved all 3 of those. That's a whole new different conversation as well. Basher Hooley in 17 and 19 was awesome, so there's the debate around that. If you want to go with that, Fife did only play in 1 grand final, Freo's only grand final. He was fine in the 2013 grand final. He was still really young, 2 years away from his first Brownlow. And of course, 6 years away from his second, but I didn't think he disgraced himself in that game at all in the slightest. So with more opportunity, could he have turned it up on grand final day? Absolutely, he could have. And in 2015, did the Dockers beat the Hawks if he doesn't break his leg? Potentially. And who knows, we would have got a Derby grand final, which would have been genuinely crazy. But the other kind of factor here is that Fife has that contested ball versus Dusty on the outside. I think because Melbourne already had Nathan Jones there as their contested player. Now, Jones is not better than Fife at all, but what I do think is that complementary skill set of the inside-outside combination would have been awesome. Early on in Dusty's career, because again, he wasn't a huge tackler at any point in his career, would a guy that doesn't tackle in a really bad side early on in Melbourne have been a big point of criticism for him? Probably. How would he have dealt with that? Who knows? But that's why I've gone with Dusty over Fife here, because of Nathan Jones. How's that for a sentence? 2010, and we welcome Gold Coast into the competition, who first drafted David Swallow, and I've redrafted them Jeremy McGovern. Now, if we talk about current list builds, if we keep everything exactly the same, which I know is not exactly the way that these things goes, but Sam Collins, Jeremy McGovern, and Charlie Ballard as your 3 tall defenders is just awesome. Gold Coast would probably be able to use Mac Andrew as kind of a Mark Blitzarves type role, probably on a wing or a taller player, second ruck, all of these kind of things that you want to do, especially with Jared Witts being sort of towards the end of his career, although still producing at a really high level. You've then got Ned Moyle and Mac Andrew as your second style ruckman is just going to be awesome. Jed Walter and Ben King won't need to be a second ruck at all. And you've got an extra midfielder there if you need to, given Mac's athletic ability. However, would McGovern have done what Stephen May and what so many other Gold Coast players did early on and just leave? Potentially, who knows? But for the sake of optimism, McGovern at that Gold Coast backline as they were establishing themselves would have been a hell of a get. 2011, welcome to GWS, who drafted Jonathan Patton and redraft Lockie Neal. 2 Brownlow medals. Need I say more? What a pickup he was for the Dockers, and of course going over to Brisbane and becoming the dominating midfielder that he is. I don't really think I need to say much more here. Lockie Neal to the Giants. Holy Moses. In 2012, GWS again, who originally drafted Lockie Whitfield, and I've redrafted them Brodie Grundy. Having a ruckman of Grundy's caliber throughout those 2017, 18, 19 years would have been insane. Yes, they had Shane Mumford, who is a better than AFL average ruckman. I'm not denying that for a moment. Grundy is undoubtedly an upgrade. And to be fair, the ruck position for the Giants has probably been the only one where they haven't had an out-and-out superstar. They have had extremely good midfielders. The forwards now with Hogan, but they had Jeremy Cameron, Toby Green. They've got Sam Taylor down there as their superstar key defender. All of those things add up. They really haven't had a superstar ruckman yet. Grundy would have provided that, and what that would have meant for different scenarios around GWS's successes towards the end of the 2010s, we will of course never know, but it's fun to think about. 2013, back to GWS, who originally drafted Tom Boyd and have redrafted Marcus Bontempelli. You can go with Bont or Cripps. I really don't mind here, and I do not think there is a bad answer at all. Cripps has, of course, got his 2 Brownlow medals. Bont has got his flag, his best and fairest, all of those kinds of things. Both of them have ridiculous records. Insert here who you think is better. I've got no problem with that at all. Bont's outside ability, combining with Josh Kelly throughout that time, would have been really cool. Canelio in there as well. Law, who was still around at that point. So if you want the contested ball of Cripps, That's absolutely fine with me. Either of these would have been tippy top for the Giants. Absolutely. 2014, we go back to St Kilda, who originally drafted Paddy McCartan, and I have redrafted them Christian Petrarca. Paddy's just one of those unlucky stories, one of the unluckiest players in the AFL. He and Dan Menzel, for me, can share that title, especially in the last 15 years. And Petrarca, I think, goes underrated in terms of he was supposed to be the next Dusty. It was he and Jordan De Goey were kind of like the first and second evolutions of Dustin Martin, if I can use a Pokemon metaphor for just a second. Petrarca was really able to beat that and become his own man and a superstar at that. Yes, he doesn't have Dusty's profile, but one Norm Smith from one grand final. He's still got the 100% strike rate that Dusty does and is a genuine superstar. I've still got Dusty higher than Petrarca all time, but I feel like Petrarca was able to carve out his own identity as that breakaway outside midfielder. I still don't think Jordan De Goey's been able to do that. And look, did St Kilda make the wrong call? Paddy McCartan's draft year was pretty insane. So whilst, yes, in hindsight, we can look at these things, who knows? In 2015, Carlton drafted Jacob Wiedering at number 1 and redraft Jacob Wiedering. He's done nothing wrong. He's one of the best key defenders in the competition. Don't really think they could have gone in a different area here. And even if you look at their modern day setup, which could be breaking a rule, but I'm going with it, it's my video, they'd be screwed down back without him. So they have undoubtedly made the right choice. I think he's been in the All-Australian squad now 5 times for 1 Blazer. If I've got that right, can't ask for much more than that. 2016, we go to Essendon, who originally drafted Andy McGrath at pick number 1 and have redrafted Tom Stewart. Now, Tom Stewart came from nowhere, so hard to blame the Bombers for this one. And Andy McGrath had a pretty good season last year, but both of these two players play in the same position. And if anyone tells you that Andy McGrath is better than Tom Stewart, they are lying to you. Stewart's a star, 5 All-Australians in the last 7 or 8 years, I think. So, genuine freak and the obvious choice here. 2017, we go to Brisbane, who originally drafted Cam Rayner, and I have redrafted them Sam Taylor. Now, the Rayner pick throughout the preliminary final was probably justified, so I've got no problem at all for those sticking up for Cam here, who's been a little bit too hit and miss throughout his career for my liking. Sam Taylor down back, one of the best defenders in the competition. What he would look like with Harris Andrews would be just genuinely insane if you think about it at that point. To be fair, this draft kind of goes under the radar as just not that great, to be honest. So no disrespect to the players that were drafted. Of course, some drafts are going to be better than others, but if you're asking me who I would rather have, it would be Sam Taylor long term. Although the retirement of Joe Danaher means that Zach Bailey and Cam Rayner are going to become more important than they have ever been. So I'm interested to see if Rayner takes that next step this year, and I hope he does. I never want to denigrate players. 2018, Carlton originally drafted Sam Walsh and redraft Sam Walsh. Now, this is going to be interesting because I know there's going to be the Connor Rozee argument that Kane Corns has pretty much made infamous at this point in time, and the 2018 draft really was a super draft. My sort of comeback to that is that I don't think Sam Walsh has done anything wrong to justify getting redrafted. I don't think anyone in this 2018 draft has done conclusively enough to knock him out of the number 1 spot. Carlton did not make a bad selection here at all. They did not make an unlucky one. They did not make an unfortunate one. So stick to what you know. And what I know is that Sam Walsh is a superstar. He needs to stop getting hurt and niggles. That would be awesome. But can Sam Walsh win a Brownlow one day? Absolutely. He can. So I think they've made the right choice here. Feel free to disagree in the comments. 2019, we go to Gold Coast, who originally drafted Matt Rowell, and I've redrafted Caleb Sarong. I just think Sarong's taken that step to A+ grade status. I don't think Rowell has done that. The umpires love him, got no problem with that at all, and as a contested bull, he does bring that aspect to the Gold Coast midfield, so I've got no problem here if you think I'm being a hypocrite with the Walsh thing, and now going back from Rowell. All I know is that if I was starting a side from scratch, I can conclusively say that I would rather Caleb Sarong over Matt Rowell, which is why I've gone with this decision. It's as simple as that for me. Now, the 2020 draft is interesting because, like I said, Jamari Ugle-Hagan as an academy player is off the table, which means that the Bulldogs don't actually pick first because they only got the number 1 pick because Adelaide bid on him before taking Riley Thilthorpe. So this is actually going to be Adelaide's pick. So Adelaide, who originally drafted Riley Thilthorpe, I have redrafted them Max Holmes. This guy won a best and fairest in the side that lost in a preliminary final, and the game turned on its head when he went off the ground. Can we stop underrating Max Holmes as a player? Please and thank you. What he would bring to the Adelaide midfield as well, which is so slow, one-dimensional, boring, and makes me want to tear my hair out. Yes, this is even after 9 months ago I said they'd be a top 4 side. Kane Cornes has now said they're going to be a top 4 side. So welcome to the hell that I have been living, Kane. It's a pleasure to have you here. But Holmes off a half-back flank to start his career, if it was the same trajectory as Geelong and what he'd be able to bring to the midfield this year, alongside Jordan Dawson and Isaac Rankin as that X-Factor midfielder, would be extraordinary in the pick that I'm going with here. In 21, North Melbourne took Jason Horne-Francis, and I have redrafted them. Jason Horne-Francis. Hear me out before you start yelling at me. We have two schools of thought here. If everything works out exactly the same, or if things work out really differently. Let's talk about the really differently just for a second. If Horne-Francis is able to stay at North and produce for North last year what he did last year for Port, which is over 20 disposals and a goal, one of only 4 players in the competition, I think, who did that, with Chad Warner, Isaac Heaney, and Marcus Bontempelli, I believe, was the other one. That's pretty good company to be in, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, who had played enough games. I think Petrarca did it as well, but only played 13 games last year. That would be extraordinary for North. So if they were able to turn it around and fix what was broken in that mould, that works out beautifully for North. If it doesn't, would you still draft Jason Horne-Francis? Go through what you went through in that season in order to get Sheasel and Wardlaw? Yeah, I would. So I think it's the right choice no matter what happens. In 22, we go back to the Giants, who originally drafted Aaron Cadman and redraft Harry Sheasel. Feel for Aaron Cadman here, because as a tall bloke, you've got to take a little bit of time, and I saw really encouraging signs, especially in the back end of last year. I thought he played pretty well against Brisbane for especially the second and third quarters. He was really good. However, Harry Sheasel is a generational player. He is the Nick Dacos without the fanfare, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he's a genuine superstar and a top at least 10, 12 player in this competition, and probably single digits, if we're being honest. I love everything that Sheasel does. Him at the Giants feels like a genuine cheat code, especially if he started down back, where you've got the IQ and the cleverness that he brings versus the dash of someone like Lockie Ash. Would just be awesome to watch. And Lockie Whitfield, of course, because we keep the lists the same. Can Cadman become a superstar? Absolutely, but I can confidently say that Harry Sheasel is going to be the better player all time, and I reckon Harry Sheasel's playing 400 games. I really do. In 23, West Coast drafted Harley Reid and redraft Harley Reid, because why the hell would they change this? Harley Mania that hit the Eagles, he probably would have been 1 or 2 in the Rising Star race. If he wasn't ineligible, of course, he would have been fighting with Sam Darcy for that if he also wasn't made ineligible with one of the dumbest rules in AFL. If he gets suspended, who gives a damn? Just reward the player who had the best year, who'd played under 10 games, and he's under 21 years of age. That's not that difficult a concept, I would not have thought. Not that I want to denigrate Ollie Dempsey from winning the award, but even he said himself in his speech that he was grateful that they got suspended. So at least we've got some self-awareness in the room. We love that from Ollie, and the footy analyst in me loves him. The Hawthorn supporter in me goes, could he play for anyone but Geelong? Would be more than handy. But West Coast aren't changing this pick, regardless of what you think other players are going to be like all time. They've made the right choice here. And speaking of the right choice, in 24, Richmond drafted Sam Lawler, and I've redrafted Sam Lawler. They haven't played a game yet, guys. This should not be a conversation. So there you go. What do you think? Comment below. Let me know. It is a pleasure to be back in 25, and I cannot wait to dominate, and I hope you can't wait to dominate either. No matter what you've got going on in your life, you are an absolute superstar, and I thank you so much for watching. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe to join the Daz Talks Footy family. We have got 2 videos a week starting next week, Mondays and Thursdays, all the way through to round 1, and then we've got some exciting things happening that I will keep updating you on via the community tab, which is why you need to subscribe. Have an awesome weekend, you absolute legends, and if it's a stinking hot where you are, where I am, look after yourselves, look after each other, stay cool, get the aircon on, love yourselves, love each other. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.